Hare Krishna. Welcome back to this series on 50 years, my 50 years in Krishna consciousness and more. And a reminder about these classes that just so as not to disappoint anybody, that this is not, a nectar shastric classes. But it's just an expression of an ordinary, regular devotee's experiences in applying Krishna consciousness during its development of, our own spiritual life and the institution, the culture, the habits, the mistakes, and the successes. Try to just convey something as I experienced it. So. In the last class, we finished with the departure of Srila Prabhupada. So this, of course, is a big turning point in our movement. And so I will spend some time to explain the experiences just, regular devotees had in dealing with this. And as I have been remiss that first I should offer my respects to Srila Prabhupada and all you devotees who are taking your time to listen to this. So, Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Vacharane Nirvishesha Shrinivari Vaskacha Desatarne, Vanchakalpatubhyascha, Kripa Sindhubhyevacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo, Namo Namaha. So, as I described in the times preceding this, that, there was a mood of continued enthusiasm, commitment, passion, and a growing emphasis on maybe external results and a bit of competitiveness and hierarchical importance. And, the institution itself becoming more structured. And yet the mood was of the mission is all in all. And to surrender to that was paramount. And now, after Srila Prabhupada's departure, a whole new world of experience opened up. And many new aspects and attitudes added to that mix. And it was a total shake-up, individually and collectively. And it was a time of grief, of uncertainty, fear, challenge, reassessment, and yet it still was a time of great commitment and determination. So, of course, the perils and problems of succession and authority were beginning, but it was a gradual buildup, not an immediate chaotic situation. I was, after Prabhupada left, I was still in Vrindavan for a while, and just to give you a sense of how we just unknown, what was going to happen. No idea what was going to happen next. A friend of mine said, so, how is it going to work? These new gurus are the devotees that become their disciples. Are they going to bow down and say, Nama Om Vishnupadaya so-and-so iti namane? And I was like, oh, don't be ridiculous. Of course not. That's for Prabhupada. So just to give a sense of, we had not pondered these things and we really didn't know. For the most part, we were very young and we were orphaned. Most of us were under 30. And the majority of ISKCON were people who had been practicing 5 to 7 years. So when you look at that, you think we had a slim chance of survival, through all of this. How will these young men take up responsibility? And, thinking that the people we'd grown up together with in Krishna consciousness, and of course they were our authorities and we respected them to some extent, but suddenly these personalities were propelled into a position that was way above the normal devotee. So to deal with all of this really, individually, we had to look at our own spiritual life. And I think for many, I don't know everyone, some people just went into kind of chaotic mode. But I think for many of us, it was a time to really dive deep into the Bhaktivedanta purports and try to understand the philosophy much more deeply. The theoretical, what we thought we knew, it now had to move into the practical lived experience as quickly as possible. And, institutionally, but even more so individually, we had to know, we had to assess what do I think, what do we believe? What is this Vani and Vapi experience? How do we keep this connection with Srila Prabhupada, and how do our questions get answered now? And, where does our faith lie? So, the movement was going through mega transformation, but for myself, I just felt I just had to keep doing what I'd been taught, what I'd been doing, and just stay busy with my, I had a lot to do with the deity organizing and outfits and making of deities and going to Jaipur back and forth, and that was what was happening for me. Of course, these questions were there, but you have to do your service. And there's so much going on in these years that I can't even put the details, straight, really. There was just too much. But from what I understand, from what I remember, probably previously we had got Gaurnitai and Krishna Balaram for New Mayapur. They had been installed, which we described. And before I returned to France after Prabhupada's departure, I'm pretty sure that I must have ordered Gaurnitai and Radha and Krishna for Italy, and maybe Gaurnitai for Spain. So, when I returned to France, of course, there's a lot of uncertainty and questions in everybody's minds, but, mostly, I think a lot of us we were just utterly sad. Just sad that, for me, it just was heartbreaking that, I'm never going to have this personal association with Srila Prabhupada that I, dreamed of. And, it was sad. And initially, it wasn't immediately a chaotic situation. Devotional life went on, as it is supposed to. We had a lot of offerings to make, books to distribute. And personally, I felt fairly positive that if we just stick to the program Prabhupada's given us, he's given us all the knowledge and all the direction we need for perfecting our lives. So we just have to hang on to that. And everything will be okay somehow. So maybe that was a bit naive, but that's how I was thinking. I had served from when I joined, I had served under Bhagavan. And And I had a good relationship with him, and I respected him. And the zone that he was in charge of was just growing rapidly. And I was surrounded by really wonderful devotees and friends, and it just seemed like things will go on. That's what I was thinking. Now, clearly everyone was not thinking like that, But some people describe it as like after the day after Prabhupada left, then everything became chaotic and everybody was fighting and everything became black. And well, that is just not accurate. And of course, it depended on where you were, who you were working for, how long you'd been in the movement, so many things. But I'm sharing my experience. And Bhagavan had not started initiating yet when I came back. And so there appeared to be some semblance of normalcy. And, busy back in between Paris and New Mayapur, things were booming, expanding. The Gurukula was growing. I don't know, it was 60 or 70 kids at least there. And a big community of, up to maybe 200 devotees. So I merged back into doing the needful, the cooking, pujari service, Sankirtan, whatever. I was on my own, so it was easy to be given different tasks, different service. And so I was easily sent here and there when something was needed. We were like pieces on a chessboard, and we were just moved around by our authorities, and we followed that, to get things done. And I was happy to have many different services. I was happy with it. I never felt like I was being forced to do something that I didn't want to do. That's my experience. And, there was major expansion throughout the zone. So, preparing deities, outfits, paraphernalia, and altars, and everything, had to be done. So I'm not sure about the order of things in the next couple of years, but in 78, definitely I was back in India for Gaur Purnima. So I'd only gone back to France for some months. And it was my first festival, my first visit to Mayapur, first Gaur Purnima festival that I experienced, first trip. And I have to admit that I was not strongly impacted by Mayapur as I was when I first went to Vrindavan. When I arrived in Vrindavan, I was just bowled over. I felt transported, I felt at home, and I just wanted to stay there. And Mayapur was nice. It was nice, but it didn't affect me in the same way. And I honestly don't even recall that much of the visit there. But of course, the big thing that was taking place were the GBC meetings, where there were big things that were being discussed, the future of the mission, the future of the Parampara. And I am sure those meetings were very intense and challenging. While the rest of us, foot soldiers, were just out there having fun on Parikrama, chanting Hare Krishna, and being in the Dham. And I did not envy the work the GBC had to do. There was just much to decide and conflicting views, and they had to at least try to show solidarity and show the devotees that they had a grip on things, how things would push on in the absence. In those meetings, usually GBC meetings, like whatever they talked about, then they brought it to Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, oh, no, don't do that. Or, he confirmed or encouraged, or his strong guidance was there. So now they're there without Prabhupada's definitive voice, And, that was, I'm sure, very difficult for all of them, you know. And despite what some devotees say, the GBC were not just an ambitious gang of men who were waiting to take over power. You know, they were individual devotees. And they were devotees that were dear to Srila Prabhupada and had been pushing forward the movement to that time. And each of them individually, they had different feelings and thoughts about what was, you know, especially about taking up this service of guru. You know, now I know for sure that some of them didn't want to do it at all. And there may be some that were very eager. That may be there also. And there were some that were really pushed into doing it because they had to kind of do it together, you know. Some of them really wanted to wait, give it time. But, you know, you couldn't really give it time. Stuff had to be said. Things had to be decided. And then some of them, they're just plunged into grief. And they're just missing Prabhupada. And, but Kirtananda, apparently Kirtananda, well, he jumped the gun. I guess he was eager to do that service. So he started initiating, and I believe it was before these Gaur Purnima festivals. So that forced their hand, that forced them to, they had to push things forward, like it or not. And they had to decide how this is all going to work, you know, and they had to work out practical, procedural things, you know, seats, sizes of them, height, you know, photos, Guru Puja, how do you do it all properly? And our only experience was Srila Prabhupada. You know, we had nothing to compare with, no elders. And so some of the GBC went to see Sridhar Maharaj, you know, to ask for some help or guidance. And that didn't seem to help much. And there were diverse feelings about even doing that. But, you know, basically, everyone was very fearful. You know, we're scared. And when you're scared, you get defensive and, you know, you do so many things to try to protect yourself. You know, we were well aware, Srila Prabhupada had explained to us what had happened with the Gaudiya Math after Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. And, you know, that was frightening for everyone, you know, that, okay, there's going to be conflict, but somehow we have to stick together and we have to try to cooperate. And, you know, just kind of grin and bear what's going on, you know, just try to, you know, because we were babies, you know, thrust too quickly into growing up. So for sure, there was going to be growing pains. There was no way around it, you know, if they would have done this or done it this way or that way. There was no way to avoid that. This is going to be painful. And, you know, there were going to be growing pains, and it was going to be awkward, you know, awkward new gurus, awkward disciples, awkward god brothers, you know, reevaluating relationships to the GBC and the gurus and their god brothers and the gurus and disciples, you know, all this kind of reevaluating and very awkward. You know, and one of the only things actually that I remember from this festival was that there were, they had made 11 seats for all of these new gurus. And, you know, they were there for Guru Puja, and everybody's sitting there, and we were supposed to offer to Prabhupada and then go around to each one of them. Oh, you know, talk about awkward. You know, there was tension, and it was bizarre. But, you know, it was sort of like, well, okay, let's try to cooperate. You know, so you have to consider all these young people also, were grieving the loss of Srila Prabhupada. And especially the leaders, they had no one to go to. But, the movement had to keep running, deities to care for, books to print, and new devotees. There are many, many new devotees waiting for initiation. And we also saw there was immediate danger from, ISKCON had assets, so there is a danger from, in some places, from Gaudiya Math, particularly in South America, that there would be an effort to take over assets, that did happen in some places, So, despite all of this, for us rank and file devotees, sometimes it's it's a blessing to just be, one of the ordinary folks, because we had a blissful festival, and it was very blissful. And what I took away from that is that, Krishna consciousness is ever present, regardless of what's going on externally. It can always be accessed. No one can get in the way of that, so back to Vrindavan for me, organizing more deity seva. And I think I went back to Jaipur and ordered some more deities and returned to France. Now, when I was leaving Vrindavan, I remember one of my friends who was one of the very quite skeptical people about the new gurus and the situation that was developing. And he was laughing and he said, oh, you're going back to France pretty soon. You're just going to be making Bhagavan's Vyasa-san, in this sarcastic way. And I'm like, get out, But sure enough, I arrived back in Paris. I mean, literally, I arrived, and in the corridor, that the entrance area, they were making Bhagavan's Vyasa Puja, or his Vyasa-san, and the devotees said, "Oh, we're so glad you're back. You can help us. He's going to be coming tomorrow, and we've got to do this." So they were just going to begin this, to put the seat there next to Prabhupada's. And wow, that was, awkward and uncomfortable for me. I'm like, oh boy, now what? So actually, I'm trying to remember, I think Bhagavan arrived the next day, and then they were going to greet him as like guru. And so he came, and we had Guru Puja simultaneous, and everyone was supposed to go, offer to Prabhupada, offer to Bhagavan, and Now I just come from Vrindavan, and that was supposed to be like the hotbed of dissent against the gurus. And so, devotees were, waiting for me to go forward, I think, as one of the more senior people there. And I was standing there watching, and I felt like really, really resistant and really uncomfortable. And I'm like, why do I have to do this? I don't necessarily want to do this. I feel pushed, like people are looking at me, and I don't like social pressure. And so I was like, and I was really getting irritated. And then I kind of heard this voice, in the back of my mind that was like, come on, what's a big deal? You give some non-devotee on the street a flower. This is a person whose lectures you listened to since you joined, and, you like him. What's a big deal? Just, give him a flower, So I submitted to that, and I went forward, and, a big smile from Bhagavan, and But I had to say that my response to that was like, I wanted to do what I felt and what was in my own heart and what was right. And I thought, well, I really felt awful when I was resisting to do it. And I felt a great sense of relief and kind of, I felt really good after. So I thought, well, I guess that's the right thing to do. And then that evening, I remember I went to Bhagavan and, we met, we discussed, and I asked him a lot of questions about this whole, new guru thing and how do we, accept it and everything. And we had what I considered a very, very nice conversation. It seemed very reasonable. And, I didn't see any reason. I kind of felt like when we were discussing, it was a deep discussion, and I kind of felt Srila Prabhupada's presence. And I thought, I guess, we have to understand this, how this parampara works, how from one spiritual master and then comes to someone and, they pass it forward. And I felt very positive in that particular discussion. I can only convey my experiences, not anybody else's. And so I was resolved to just, cooperate. And we were on a learning curve and, trying to understand how parampara works, what is it to be pure, how pure do you have to be guru, what, all these questions. So much to consider. And I don't know, I think Bhagavan maybe around June or July of that year, then he did his first, as a Grihasta, he did his first initiation ceremony. And at the time, there was not resistance to it or seemed to go okay. So in discussing with Bhagavan later, after some time, he wanted me to return to India to oversee these deities that were ordered and to order Radha Govinda Madhava. Of course, we didn't know they would be Radha Govinda Madhava, but Radha and Krishna for New Mayapur. And we discussed, what they should look like, what we wanted them to look like. And we had an artist there, I think Purnasya, made a sketch of how they should look, so I could give this to the Murtiwala. And of course, the Paris deities and those deities that had already been installed needed also their next outfits for festivals and everything. So it was that I was sort of becoming like the zonal buyer for all things to do with the deity worship, So I returned to India by Janmashtami of 78 and stayed there for quite a while. And now I went to Jaipur to order Radha and Krishna for New Mayapur and to check on other deities. And around this time, as Bhagavan took sannyas, I think he took sannyas in Vrindavan. And personally, I was unhappy about that. I didn't see the need for it. But there was a lot of pressure from GBC that, as guru, it's better to be a sannyasi. And so he kind of buckled and went ahead with this sannyas initiation. I mean, he had young children and his wife was a dear friend. And I thought it was just heartbreaking for them. I didn't feel it was right, but everybody's got their own feelings, and the pressure was there. So he did that. He took sannyas, and then I think it was right after there were many sannyasis. Maybe they were there for the sannyas initiation. I think it was in Vrindavan. He took from Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And then I had gone to Jaipur, and then all of these swamis were also there. I'm not quite sure why they were in Jaipur, but many of them came to the Murti Wala, and they were watching as we were overseeing some of the deities. And my later, much later, my husband-to-be, Hari Sori, I remember him being there and ordering, he was ordering deities for New Govardhan. Now, they had all come to the Murti Wala, and then they'd gone off to the LMB restaurant for lunch, and I stayed to watch the polishing of Yeshua's Krishna deity for Italy. And the old lady, they polish with stone, on stone, and she was doing the face, and then suddenly I saw her, move and cover the face of Krishna very quickly. And I was like, oh, because I was a little nodding out, and I was like, oh, what happened? So I uncovered the face, and a large portion of his nose had broken off right in the last. I mean, we were hoping to pack those deities then. And so I took that portion of the nose to the restaurant where all the swamis were, and I was so overwhelmed that I just I just went up to them. Look, Bhagavan showed him, this, it was terrible. And so, those deities obviously had to be remade. And as it goes, those deities for Italy, as from I remember, had to be made not just once more, but twice more, and that's another story. But it's just to show that, this is, what this service was like, that, it was a lot, there was a lot involved in getting deities made. They didn't kind of just drop out of the sky. So over the next 9 months, I spent, prepared everything required for the installation. And Nartamananda was also making preparations in Mumbai for the altars that would be installed, the Shringasan and other things, bases, lotus bases. And so I would go back and forth from Jaipur and Vrindavan to oversee this carving. And these were, I'm just telling these bits because it's a part of the history that not many people know about. So, and it's interesting, how the deities came about. And what it was, we'd go on these, it was a grueling trips that left at 6 a.m. from Vrindavan bus stop on a rickety old crowded bus with half of the windows out, and it was austere, and it was a 6 and 7 hour journey at that time. And they had to just get straight into the whole, it wasn't a touring around Jaipur at all, just had to get to work, get to the Murti Wala and get things done. So, because at that time, making deities, it was something that, it had to be overseen because it was something new that ISKCON had started with the making of the Vrindavan deities. That, in general, up until this point, most deities were carved with carved clothing on them. And that's why a lot of our early deities, like London and Paris, they have carved clothing, and that makes it very difficult. But for dressing and for patterns and everything. So Jamuna and Bharadraj, I believe, they orchestrated the deities for Vrindavan without all that carving, So this was something new, that something new that ISKCON started, and over years it's become a standard, So it was very interesting, this whole area in Jaipur. It's like many blocks, many streets and lanes where, a whole area that's just exclusively for making deities, one shop after another, long lines of shops. And, every kind of deity and every size is laying out, and, it's very interesting. And big chunks of marble and the constant sound of chiseling going on everywhere. You know, and for hundreds of years, these traditions of how they do this amazing artwork, incredible. At one time I thought, they make it look easy. They have very crude, they use very crude tools to do their carving. And it looks like it's easy, you know, so I tried it. It's absolutely not. It's incredibly difficult. And, you know, and they make according to specific Shastric instructions, you know, how to make deities. But, you know, we started a little bit, you know, in ISKCON fashion, because we want to dress the deities. We want to decorate them, you know. So it was important to watch over and to see, because this was new to them. It's new to us, it's new to them. And there's many things that you need to think about to carve properly so that it's easier, you know, to dress the deities nicely, like Krishna's hands. The hole needs to be big enough for the flute, and the position of the hands so that the flute sits properly, and that there's, you know, a space between the chest and the arm so that you can put chadar through, and that there's space between the legs so that you can, you know, nicely put on a dhoti, and that the forehead are, you know, wide enough for placing crowns and turbans so that they're not, you know, way down here. You know, and there's many things to do, and checking the quality of the marble, that there are no spots, or especially that spots might come during the carving. Sometimes they come in a bad place, like right on the face or something, then you've got to start again. And you have to check, because they had lots of ways of cheating. So they would, you know, sometimes paint over, and they know how to do it well. They'd paint over where, that's what happened with Radha in Paris. So they had painted over a black spot. And when they did the Abhishek, the paint was coming off. And then Prabhupada saw that, you know, it was a mark. So, you know, it's a trick what they, you know, they've carved this whole deity, and then when they get to the face, and suddenly there's some mark, and, you know, they don't really want to throw that deity away. And, you know, so these are things that had to be checked, overseen, you know. And the painting, especially, and even more so the packing, because this was new for them, sending a lot of international, and, you know, if they were packed badly. And it's a real art of how to pack the deities, because if you put too much pressure on certain places on a marble deity, they can easily crack. But there's some places where you can put incredible pressure, they'll never, you know, so these are things that have to be known. And materials. Somebody just told me recently, now they have materials that just like blow up like foam inside, and incredible things. But in those days, you know, it was pretty crude. So you had to find the right, you know, materials for packing, and they were tied in with ropes in certain places, you know. So, you know, all of those things had to be done. And then, you know, once they're in the boxes, I wanted to make sure that they would arrive without being bounced around, you know, too much. So I would go myself in a taxi, usually a Jeep, to the Delhi airport, and deliver them kind of by hand, to do as much as you could to avoid any breakage. So yeah, I'm just giving you a sense of, you know, what it was. I mean, of course, nowadays you can just go online and, you know, I want this, and, you know, and they make really nice deities in many different places. But mostly ISKCON worked with one particular family, the Pandey family. Over time, they broke up into 3 different places. And, you know, and they got very expensive, but they're very good. And we tried once to do somewhere else, and it was a disaster. So, you know, we stuck with the Pandey brothers. Now, when I went on the last trip to pick up the deities for New Mayapur, Radha and Krishna. And I walked in and I saw them standing there, and I was so disturbed because up until that point I thought they were looking very nice, and they just didn't look nice. And I thought, what, you know, why? And Krishna's head, it looked like it was so tilted. And, you know, it hadn't been like that before. And, you know, the more I looked, the more I was getting upset. And then it dawned on me, these are not the same deities that I have been overseeing all these months. Oh my God, I was so angry. And the Murtiwala was backing up and going, this means like, you know, he knew he'd done something really wrong. Somebody had come and wanted them. I found out many years later who. And so they, you know, somebody's there with money in hand, ready to buy. And so they gave those deities. I never thought at the time, I didn't even wonder where did they go, anything. I was just so angry and upset that I just couldn't believe it. And so what to do? You know, the installation's in a few months. And so I spent time there and tried to have them carve better, but, you know, eventually I just packed them. And I brought them in a truck, in a van, to Vrindavan, to the guest house room where I was staying. And we organized to get them out, hired some men to get them out, stand them up in my room. And I got a tailor with his sewing machine and everything. And we just went into full-on marathon mode of stitching everything up for the installation, preparing everything. Now, that means every morning I was waking up and seeing Radha and Krishna standing there in my room. But the thing is that every morning I look at them and I get more irritated that I was unhappy with how they were carved. So I did a crazy thing that when I think back, I just can't believe it. I thought, I'm taking them back and they're going to continue, they're going to carve them better, they're going to fix them better. And so it was great difficulty. These are huge deities, putting them back in those boxes and I got a Sankirtan van and some devotees to help me and go back to Jaipur. And they were shocked. Well, why are you bringing that in? And I was like, you've got to make them better, you know, and they just couldn't believe it. And finally, the elderly, you know, founder of the Pandey shop, you know, the father, you know, he came down and said, don't worry, I will do myself, you know. So, you know, they were working, they really tried their best to satisfy this crazy young girl that wanted Krishna to look a certain way. And, you know, at some point, you know, because there's no way, it's not like on the computer, you can't just point and click and move the nose over. You know, they are what they are once they've been carved. There's a limited amount that you can do, you know. So at some point, I realized, you know, I just started crying. And, you know, the Murtiwala was like, well, what can we do? What can we do? And I was like, I realized that, you know, I was absolutely crazy and foolish to think, I'm going to control how Krishna appears in this world. And I just realized how ridiculous this whole endeavor was and that I had to just let go. And so I did do that, and I brought them back to Vrindavan. That was a crazy episode. But meanwhile in Vrindavan, you know, while I was there all those months preparing everything, there was really a growing resistance, mainly in Vrindavan. Outspoken resistance to, you know, the guru system that was, you know, and this was building up, you know. And personally, I just, you know, I listened to different devotees' points of view, what they had to say, and, I wasn't really sure what to think. I definitely had a lot of questions. And I was close with Arundhati. Now, she's the wife of Pradyumna. As you know, Pradyumna was Panditji, the scholar that traveled with Srila Prabhupada. And he was living in Radha Damodar in Prabhupada's quarters. And so sometimes I used to go and clean there. So I had opportunity to talk to him about his views. And he had written a letter to the GBC. I think that was like around July, August, 78. And, warning the GBC of, what they're doing, how they're going about things is not really correct. And it wasn't really received well. I think that's maybe putting it mildly, but I talked to him, and the things that he had to say he seemed to have genuine concerns and reasonable viewpoints. So it was just, well, I don't know, who knows? And also in my spare time, I was typing for Yashoda Nandan Swami, who was another one that was, very outspoken and resistant to all that was going on. I didn't really know. He just asked me to type some things, and really it was just a compilation of quotes from Shastra about gurus and spiritual masters and things. And of course, it's interesting. It was Shastra. I wasn't like, it was just something interesting, and it was a service to do, But I could feel that there's, for me, it was just questions, wondering and trying to understand. I wasn't angry, it was just uncertain. But you could feel that there was a lot of anger brewing. And, we started to hear more about how things were going on around the world, that gurus are eating on silver plates, and the simultaneous guru puja, and, things, and how people have to take initiation only from the zonal guru and these things. And, it sounded kind of bizarre, some of it, and what to make of it, And, we all knew, Srila Prabhupada told us that after the Acharya leaves, there is chaos, And so he had told us that. So I didn't expect that things were going to just be smooth and peachy keen, So I just thought, this is something we have to tolerate and work through, whatever, and life goes on. You just keep doing your service. So, I was just there in Vrindavan and hearing these things, wondering about these things. But in the meantime, it was just great being in Vrindavan. And I was there for, I guess it was my first Guru Puja, Govardhan Puja festival. And we had heard that other temples, all the temples around Vrindavan, that they make a Krishna holding Govardhan out of cow dung. So we heard about that, and that they put ladus in his stomach. So we're like, hey, that sounds cool. We should do that. But, we'd never seen it, So we made, I think it was Bhakti Siddhanta, who we got some like chicken wire frame, and we made a standing up Krishna with under the tree in the courtyard, Krishna standing, and somehow we made it that he was holding up Govardhan, and it was this wire frame, and then we covered with cow dung. And then we had to fill the legs with the ladus so that it would come up all the way into the stomach. So it was this whole bizarre thing that we did. And, I saw people thought it was amazing, the visitors that were coming, and they're looking very quizzical. This is the way the Angrejis do it. We always do something different. And then later in the afternoon, I went with some devotees on darshan to other temples, and then we said, oh, this is what they do. they make the cow dung Krishna on the floor. That would have been a lot easier, so live and learn. But that was a unique ISKCON presentation, which we often do. And anyway, I just was personally very inspired and loved being in Vrindavan. And, things didn't really change for me personally, all that was going on. But, there was a lot going on, and it wasn't just about the departure of Prabhupada and Guru issues. There was also, ISKCON was facing like a $5 million or more, maybe, court case from this Robin George. And this, I think it started in '76, and it went on for many years. It was a huge, huge thing that ISKCON dealt with, huge. People should know that history. I think it's spoken about somewhere, maybe in the Lilamrita, somewhere. But it actually was amazing how ISKCON, despite all the problems we were going through, really worked together to overcome this like immense problem that would have destroyed the whole movement. Because at this time in America, these cult issues were a big problem. I think it was this year, 78 or 9, when there was that cult of the Jim Jones where, 900 followers died, something like that, But there were a lot of things going on that were problematic, And, but this Guru issue thing, by February in '79, I was still there. I've been many months. I think I must have stayed about 9 months in Vrindavan. And it had heated up so much that the entire GBC body came to Vrindavan to try to rectify or at least calm down the concerns, or maybe to stamp out the resistance, that there was going to be a confrontation. And because Vrindavan was seen as kind of the heart of the problems. And so right in the temple room, everybody came together right in front of the deities, and it was very intense discussion, I guess you could say, argument in the temple room. And, devotees were trying to listen and trying to convey things peacefully, but then somebody else would start to shout, and, it was difficult. It was difficult. It was scary, Actually, Yashodanandan Maharaj was very frightened, because I guess he was sort of at the head of it. And he wouldn't even come down from his room to the temple room. And somebody finally, he had armed guards on the roof. He was scared, here's the whole GBC's going to come down on his head. It wasn't just him, it was many, many devotees there. And it was a general consensus that we're not happy with what's going on. And, finally he did come down, and I think Pradyumna just left. I don't remember him speaking. I don't know. But I only remember one thing, that Yashodanandan finally came down, and he took the microphone, and he just said one thing. And he said, I want to know who here can say honestly that they are free from the 4 defects. And that was a good point. But things didn't really go so well, but everyone was trying. And then of course there were the GBC meetings right after that. And another challenge, a big long letter, 30, 35-page letter that was similar to Pradyumna's, that was signed by many devotees, came to the GBC. And so there was this growing polarization happening. And to be honest, it's one of the times in my life where I felt fortunate to be a woman. You know, it's like watching, it's just like watching this drama playing out. I guess it's different being without position, which most women were without any significant position in management or anything. It's sort of like you got nothing to lose. Famous Dylan line. But you could see this, that there was this struggle, not just for philosophical understanding, but for power and for position. And it was difficult. And of course, at GBC, they saw the need that, maybe they need to expand gurus, because I think for some of the men, they were just upset that their name wasn't on the list. And they didn't want to, there were some like that. But, that wasn't really the answer either. So, there was increased polarization. And, it was like, we're like a bunch of adolescents, without the parent around. And we had to decide for ourselves. And so now, this is a new sort of turning point for ISKCON where, there were always, different moods and different styles in ISKCON, but now there were really different views, different viewpoints. And, where Srila Prabhupada in just one sentence, he would just resolve any problem, but, we didn't have that. So we were winging it. And there were no systems yet at this time for mediation or conflict resolution. These things didn't exist yet, But the thing is, despite what was happening around me, I was feeling super inspired at this time of my life, and I was very busy with a lot of service. And one of the things that began for me in this time was taking part in the kirtan in the temple. I'd learned a bit of mridanga, and my friend Arundhati was a really good harmonium player. And another friend, Madhira, was an excellent mridanga player. And the three of us, we got a slot of playing together for the 24-hour, I think it was 24-hour kirtan at that time, yeah. And it was, believe it or not, in the afternoon, I think between 4 and 7 before the late. And it was the three of us, and of course many others would join in. But it was, I think, one of the best times of my life, just immersed in doing those kirtans in front of the deities in Vrindavan Dham. It was fantastic. So we were just really interested. We were like a group, a little musical group. The three of us and others came, but mainly we were the core. And we were real interested in trying to learn traditional Bengali tunes. So we'd go around, we'd try to hear different places and have this little cassette recorder, and then we'd practice how to learn those tunes. And I remember that we had heard that there was some really nice bhajans that went on in the Radha Vallabh temple at night. And so we went down late at night. I remember it was cold winter time. And it's like, after 8 o'clock, they would start, there would be these elderly sadhus, and they're all wrapped up with the blankets, and they're all set up for the whole night. They're going to sing, and there was one that would play Esraj, and they were just it was totally out of this world to sit there in the nighttime in total quiet, no sounds around, just this, beautiful bhajans going on. And we We loved it, and they loved that they were there. I mean, they were just shocked, these old men, that, you know, these young Western girls, I mean, what are they doing coming out late at night? Anyway, I mean, it's like unseen by them. But it was absolutely ecstatic times of just wonderful kirtan. And but at some point in my time there, of course, I needed a visa extension. I was told I could just go to Rishikesh. There's somebody there. You just pay him off, and he stamps your. So off I went. I had a little harmonium, and I thought I'm going to go sit on the bank of the Ganga and have kirtan. And unfortunately, I had a massive boil on my backside. And so I was laying in the very back of the bus, laying down so that I wasn't putting pressure on the on the boil. And we had a huge crash in that bus, like really bad. We went into a huge ditch, and it's a whole story. But I was very hurt from my shoulders. I couldn't even move. I couldn't lift my arms. And then we arrived in Rishikesh, or maybe Hardwar, maybe, not sure. And everybody, the bus did make it. Somehow they got it out of the ditch and everything, and no one was like severely hurt. It was pretty bad. But, you know, we made it the rest of the way. We were pretty close when that happened. And then everybody scurried off the bus, and I couldn't even move, couldn't pick up my my bag or my harmonium. And it was, you know, middle of the night. And some little rickshaw guy finally came in and helped me and took me somewhere, you know. And it was just terrible. Then the next morning I couldn't even like brush my hair, couldn't lift anything. It was. And, you know, Rishikesh, in those days, they took me somewhere where they were fixing people with broken arms and stuff, and there's like plaster all over the place. And these people, you can see they're like looking at x-rays. It's like the first x-ray machine ever. And I thought, these guys don't know what they're doing. I said, no, just bandage me up, you know. So I was all bandaged. And somehow or another made it back, got my thing stamped, made it back to Vrindavan, and, you know, actually it never healed properly. It was terrible for months. I had, you know, needed help, you know, but these were like the trials and tribulations in India. And then I had my first bout of malaria. And in those days, malaria was like the common cold, you know, and the thing is they didn't have yet the kind of medicines that they have now. So it meant if you got it once, then you could just get it again and again. It just reoccurs, you know. It's just awful, you know, it's just my body was just getting ripped apart in these early days. And so, I mean, eventually I went to... heard about some amazing doctor, Ayurvedic doctor in Delhi, and he was very famous. And so, you know, I went there, and there were literally hundreds of people waiting. And I thought, oh, forget it. I'm out of here. And then someone saw me, and they took me, because it was so unusual to see a foreigner, what to speak of a woman. You know, so they took me right to the front, which, you know, normally I don't like to do those things. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do it. I went to the front, and, you know, I had this experience, which is just amazing, with this doctor, that he just glanced at me. They sent me right in to him, and he just, you know, just 2 seconds, he glanced at me, said, sit down, put your hand. And in 2 minutes, he didn't ask me any questions. He didn't look at nothing. He just held my arm, and then he said, you feel, and then he went, na 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 na, you know, and he explained everything about my physical condition. And then he just glanced over at me, and he said, did I miss anything? And I was like, no. And they said, okay, go. So then, you went off into the line where you got your medicines and stuff, but it was just probably he's like the last of the Mohicans, in that this is what Ayurveda used to be in India, that, that there was really a Shakti there. And that, all of this, what we have nowadays with where you get like hundreds of pills for 6 months or a year or something, that there was no question. You got something that was supposed to heal you. You might have to come back after 3 days and have an adjustment in your medicines. But, and things were fresh, and they were made fresh, and they were, put into these little newspapers, not very sattvic, but anyway, in little, bundles, and that was it, But anyway, that was, just some interesting experiences conveying. So then eventually I was ready, and I had to get back to France for the installation of what would be Radha Govinda Madhava. And, getting everything back, I had to have the deities shipped over there. That had been done. And, it turned into a whole art form of how to get your luggage on without paying. There was all these trickeries that we developed over time where you could just get your luggage on without paying, So it was kind of an art form that developed over time. But anyway, getting back to France, there was, a big Janmashtami celebration for the installation, and also it would be a Vyasa Puja ceremony for Bhagavan. And so this happened on the outside of the chateau on the veranda, where everyone was really beautiful, very, very beautiful, huge festival. And everyone was just so happy to see Radha Govinda Madhava. And of course, I'm still always too tilted. But you have to let go. Once they're installed, you don't think like that. That's over. But before, And I just saw how devotees were so happy to see the new, it just changes everything. Radha and Krishna has come, It's just such a wonderful experience. And amazing to, remember that block of marble and how they manifest. And, first you do a pencil drawing on them, and then this and that, and, and then there they are, and Krishna descends, and then it's a completely different thing. And then they stole the hearts of the devotees. And then we had this Vyasa Puja. Again, everyone was happy. It was massive. We had all-night kirtan till Mangalarti. It was blissful. And sometimes people, they look back, it was horrible, we shouldn't have done that or whatever, but we were doing kirtan. We were doing kirtan all night. What could be wrong? What could be bad? It was ecstatic, and it was ecstatic because we were chanting Hare Krishna, So although, it was tumultuous times around the world, but in the zone where I was, in Bhagavan's zone, it was flourishing, and it was growing in a huge way. It's a time of the biggest growth, So, people like to paint things as all black and white. It was wonderful, and then it was horrible. And but, yes, bad things were going on. Yes, mistakes were being made, but wonderful things were going on. And devotees were joining, and temples were opening, and deities were being installed. And, during just this 1 year of 1979, we bought in Belgium, we got Radhadesh, this, amazing place, 11th century chateau. I think with 300 or 400 acres or something around it. And it had been a home to aristocrats, and it was used in World War I and II as like hospital, and the villagers took shelter there. And I think in World War II, American soldiers occupied it. But, it was like this amazing place, but it had been empty for many years. So, kind of a spooky place, and required huge renovation project. And then, now I'm not sure exactly when, but that year, in the early 80s, I'm not sure, Radha Gopinath was then installed. They came from Amsterdam. They'd been installed in 1977, and Prabhupada gave them their name. And Radha Gopinath with their two beautiful little gopis, so beautiful. And that was a very big event, that installation there. And that was later. But the place itself was purchased in 1979. And so that was Belgium. And then in Italy in 1979, Villa Vrindavan was purchased. And this is a historic, huge villa in Tuscany, 4 centuries old, just like, 4 or 5 miles from Florence. And, this was also another huge renovation project. I think that Matsya Avatar, who was a famous furniture designer and redecorator, he did a huge amount of work to fix that up, I think. And in Spain, there we got New Brajamandala, and that is another huge, farm project. Beautiful place, really nice place. So Srila Prabhupada had told Bhagavan that if he could get 5, I don't remember if it was 5 or 6 properties like New Mayapur in Europe, then it would change the face of Europe. That's what Prabhupada said. So, we were trying hard to do that. Imagine how the devotees were working to pay for all of this and to develop all of this. It required massive funds and hard work. And at the same time, book distribution was going on like full steam. It was very huge. Especially France was one of the biggest in the world. All this going on at the same time, incredible. Just incredible. So, for me, I was thinking, well, we must be doing something right. Things are growing, everything's, that's how I was thinking. And, just massive growth, So, every place that we got needed deities carved and outfits made and everything for installations. And so that was what I did through the 80s. I became the zonal buyer, and it made me very busy and was a really blissful time. Back and forth from India and France, also spending time in France and Belgium and Italy and Spain and assisting in different ways. So that was through the 80s. That was my situation, and that was very, very nice. So you can understand that, I don't like it when things get portrayed in black and white. There were a lot of different things going on. And we need to look at all sides of the story, and everybody's story is different. That's why I'm just telling my story. That was my story. So maybe I will stop here for now. I'll consider where to start up from our next class. Thank you very much for listening. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.